Hello and welcome back to the Tin Barn. I'm Pragmatic Lee, and in today's video we're going to see what we can do with a piece of rusty, extremely rusty, crusty piece of railroad iron. Let me get the camera positioned a little differently and I'll show you what I'm talking about. This is a piece of railroad track that I recently acquired along with some other metal, and it's been kind of weighing on my mind a little bit as far as what I could actually do with it. I've already got a post anvil made out of a piece of railroad track, so I got some thoughts on what I'm going to do with this later, which will not be a post anvil. But today I want to look at what I can do with this piece. But for whatever reason, that was torched off. And this long piece out here would be a nice piece of metal. I know there's good steel under that. Railroad track is made kind of from a medium carbon steel, so there's some pretty good material under that. But I don't know whether it happened during the torching or if this piece of track was actually in a curve or just what, but there is actually a little bit of a curve in this direction in this piece of track, and I'm not sure if you can see it in the video, but it's twisted a little bit clockwise from where I'm standing. So to use this, salvage this piece right here as a whole piece, I don't think would be practical. I don't have a way to heat it all to try to straighten it back out. But I do have something in mind to do with this in smaller sections. Probably 4, possibly 5 out of that. I'll give you a little background. When I was growing up, my house is located in the area right here where the shop is. But to my west is where my grandfather's home was, and actually my great-grandfather's home, maybe 200 yards west of me. 200 yards east of me is where I grew up. My mom and daddy's house was down there. So growing up, I had the opportunity here on the farm to be around my grandparents much more than the rest of the grandchildren did. And as long as I can remember, I'm almost 70 years old, be 70 years old in a couple months. But as long as I can remember, going up to my granddaddy's house and going under the tractor shelter, what he called the tractor shelter, there was a post. To me, it seemed real high back then, but now I'm imagining it was probably about 4 feet high. But on top of that post was this block of steel. That's about a 4-inch square piece of steel, 1.25 inches thick maybe. Yep, with a hole in the center. And Pop Eden, as I always called him, grandchildren called him, he called this his anvil. And I can remember thinking, well now, don't you know what an anvil is? That don't look like an anvil. But then as I grew up, I become aware of the term called a bench anvil. And like I say, he always referred to this as his anvil. The center hole was used to drive out rivets. The solid part put back in rivets, or maybe drive out a rusty old bolt that had been cut off. So this indeed was his bench anvil. Sometime back, you may recall, if you follow my channel, I made this bench anvil. This is following some plans from that crazy machinist up in Canada, Mark. And I made this, and in that video, I actually talked about this piece. And at that point in time, I thought this was long since lost. The barns have been long since torn down, but I found out later that my mother actually had that wrapped up in Christmas wrapping paper and used as a stand for a Charlie Brown Christmas tree. So when I mentioned that one day, long before she died, she said, well, I know where it's at. It's right over on the bookcase. So today what I'm thinking about doing is cutting this off and then sawing it up in pieces and dressing it up to make a bench anvil. Make several bench anvils for friends, whoever might need one that's close by. So let's turn over to the saw and get to work on this. I'm over here at the horizontal bandsaw now, and we're going to saw this remnant off the end down here. I'm going to carry this back to the workbench, mark it off into probably 3 6-inch sections, come back and cut them off. I won't try to video that. It's just same thing as a saw cut. Okay, I've got the track cut into 3 pieces now, and I carried this one over to the disc grinder and just cleaned off some of that remnant slag from the torch. I believe there's probably enough carbon in this railroad track that this actually work hardened a little bit where that torch got it red hot. We'll cut it with some end mills that I don't care a whole lot about, and I'm going to be using what I call my flood coolant. I don't really flood it. I just keep enough on there to keep the material and the end mill cool. And I've had several folks to question me or ask about my coolant system. I have my mill is sitting right here, of course. The lathe is just to the left. There's about 3 foot difference between 3 foot of space between the lathe and the milling machine, and the surface grinder is behind the lathe. I have a centralized cooling tank and one pump. I've got a switch in each location. This is a switch in on each machine, and I've had several folks to ask about it. If you're interested in seeing the way I set this up, it's a homemade system. If you're interested in seeing it, let me know down in the comments, and I'll try to do a video on the way I set it up, the way I wired it. I can turn it on and off at each machine and adjust the flow as well at each machine with this simple little valve here. The other 2 machines that this is hooked to, of course, are turned off right now. Okay, I really wasn't getting anywhere using that old cheap import end mill. Knocked the points off really quick. So what I decided to do was, instead of approaching this from the top with an end mill, I've got a roughened end mill in there now, and I'm coming in from the side and taking probably 100 thousandths at the time, depth-wise, off of this work-hardened area. And of course, I'm conventional milling the whole time, so I'm going to come back over here. And I'll try 200 thousandths there as far as stepping in on my y-axis. And once it gets the end mill engaged, it seems to be doing better. So I'll bring it back a little later. All right, I think I've finally got through all that work hardened surface where the torch, where it was cut with the torch. What I'm going to do now is Still got the rough and end mill in now, and I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but I did turn my RPMs down to about 600 RPMs. And I'm going to come back over here. Not sure if I can get my finished pass in one more traverse across, but I'm going to see just how much I can get now. I can go a little deeper. Alright, that'll be 130 thousandths in this thickest part. We'll see how that does. And again, I'll bring you back when I get a little closer to having it cleaned up. Alright, I'm pretty much cleaned up all the way across except for just a little bit on this edge here. So I'm going to come down about 50 more thousandths, make one more pass across this side, and it'll be finished and we'll be ready to flip it. Alright, I got the worst side cleaned up. This is the mate to it, what it looked like when we started, and this is what it looks like now. There's obviously some mill marks on there, end mill marks, but we'll take care of those over on the surface grinder. I'm going to set it in now, and this edge, this side, which was the rail side, train side if you will, be much easier to clean up. It's been a while since the train's been over this track. It's pitted pretty good, but we should be able to clean it up in one, if not two passes. I'm going with 100 thousandths depth of cut on this first pass. It's leaving just a little bit right here, but I know we'll have to clean up some off these edges, especially since this has got a little bit of curvature to it. But what I'll do is take that 100 thousandths, come back to this side, move in about 300 thousandths on the y-axis, and cut again. Now I'm going to come back to this side so that I'm conventional milling on each pass, because we're cutting a whole lot more with the side of the end mill now than we are with the end of it. Now there's about 300 thousandths on the Y. And I'll keep doing this until we get all the way across and see if we need to make another pass. Alright, I got the top, or the two flat sides, milled off now. I'm pretty much happy with them. We're going to set it up on the edge now. Set it up on one edge. And whatever curvature there may be in this one, we'll just have to take out material until enough material until we clean it up. This side shouldn't take but maybe a couple passes. And I'm going to start with about 50 thousandths on this edge. This other end may be sticking up, middle may be sticking up. Just don't know until we make a pass. Alright, I've got that edge cleaned off now. I'm going to carry it over to the belt sander, deburr these edges, come back and get this one. Both of the flat sides are cleaned up now. The two edges are cleaned up and parallel with one another. So what I'm going to do now is dress up the ends. Then after that we'll be pretty much done on the mill and we'll go over to the surface grinder. Alright, I'll do the other end, and then we'll probably go over to the drill press next to put a single hole in here. That hole will serve two purposes. One, you can hang it up on pegboard if you've got pegboard in your shop, but the main purpose would be to drive a pin out of whatever you may be working on your workbench. Okay, I'm over at the Powermatic drill press now that I did several videos on over the last couple months. I guess I probably shouldn't call it by name brand. I begin to sound like a 30-minute commercial. But let's see if we can drill a hole. You see, I have this work stop over here that'll keep the workpiece from, even if I'm not holding it, it'll keep it from twisting. Alright, there we have a simple 5/16 hole. I think while I'm right here, I'm going to countersink that hole just a little bit. There we have a nice little countersink. Alright, let's go over to the surface grinder and we'll surface grind all 6 edges. Then we'll chamfer all the edges, and if necessary we'll go back one more time. If during the chamfering we scratch the surface, we'll go one more time and clean these face surfaces up. Okay, I'm over at the surface grinder now, and one of the main things I wanted to do in this video of making a bench anvil is to go over surface grinding a little bit. Now, most of you know, and if you don't know, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm a rank amateur. I do this as a hobby. I have no professional training, and so I'm a bit reluctant to make critical remarks about the way somebody else does it. But there's a few things I think you, as far as regarding a surface grinder, that you might be interested in knowing. Number one, when you get ready to come to your surface grinder, don't just mount your piece, turn the surface grinder on, and start grinding. What you need to do is turn it on and watch your lube indicator. On this surface grinder, it's up here right above the label, and it's way down, the oil level is showing way down at the very bottom. What you need to do is let your surface grinder run. I usually let mine run a lot of times for 5 minutes or more. That gives this lube plenty of time to pump to get it up here. In the winter months, when it's cool in here, or even cold, almost freezing in the 10 barn, it'll take a little bit longer for the pump to get this whey oil, get it moving. I'm up now at my high oil mark, so I'm fine. But that also gives time for the motor to warm up, the bearings to get lubed. All right, I'm going to turn it back off for now. Another thing I want to mention that I see done by, and again, I'm very reluctant to be critical of someone that's a semi-pro in the machining world, but I've seen him numerous times put his workpiece on the mag chuck, mag it down, position the stone above it, turn the stone on, and work down to it. Folks, I have seen him several times, more than once, doing that, and actually cut a gouge in his work. He has mentioned it at least once or twice that oops, I went too far. But in just about every video where you see him do that, as you watch him start grinding, as it's passing, there'll be a split second where the sparks will diminish. There'll be very few of them, and that's where that gouge is. I may be totally off base here, but what I like to do is just manually spin the wheel. Up here on this surface grinder, I've got On mine, I've got two adjustment wheels. This one revolution of this wheel, and I'll get it up out of the way, but one revolution of this wheel is 50 thousandths. One revolution of this wheel is 1 thousandths. So I like to take the coarse feed and just manually come down, and all I'm doing is spinning that wheel until it stops. And then I'll back off a little bit and tighten it down, tighten this wheel down so that what I'm using is the fine adjust. Now I'll back off of it, and I will not advance any. There's a good chance it won't even touch at all this time. And there's a good chance that once it does touch off, it'll be higher on one end than it is on the other end, or higher on one side than it is on the other side. And you may wonder, why in the world you just took this off the mill? Why isn't it flat, parallel from one side of the other? Well, remember over there on the mill, I was taking some very rough cuts. That first side I had it setting on parallels, rust setting on parallels, so it could shift a little bit on those parallels. My mill may not be 100% pure trammed, making one side a little higher than the other, and occasionally the end mill may slip a half a thou or a thousandths, or maybe even a couple thousandths. So those are all things I kind of like to watch for when I get to the surface grinder. And again, this video is about making a bench anvil, but it's as much about your surface grinder as anything else. And this is a Herrig surface grinder, Super 612, but I'm not name dropping. I'm going to zoom you in a little closer. Okay, I didn't video it, but I have already dressed the wheel on here. We will do another dress on camera when we get ready to put the final finish on. Alright, I got the wheel spinning up. I'll get the table feed going. And just like over on the mill, we've got the same coolant system over here. It'll take a moment for the pump to get everything, to get the coolant pumped over to this side. But we'll try to keep it flooded. And again, I'm not sure if I touch this time, it'll be just in a few spaces. Alright, with this surface grinder, this is a 220 volt or 240 volt 3-phase motor on this surface grinder. I am running it on a VF variable frequency drive, VFD, that is fed with 110, and it converts that 110 to 220 3-phase. So this doesn't have full power, full torque. So I can't take 10 thousandths at the time. I usually start out with about 3 to 4 thousandths until I'm getting a surface contact over, I'd say, 75% of the surface. Right now it looks like there's just a high spot in a few places. Right in the middle there seems to be a little bit of a high spot. So I'm coming down 3 thousandths at a time, and I'm stepping over on the Z-axis. Remember, on a surface grinder, as you're feeding in toward the axis, that is the Z. Y is the down feed, and of course X is crossways. I'm sure I'll get some comments on that, but look it up, guys. I was going to say, the step over I'm doing on the Z is 100 thousandths at the time. When we get ready to do our finish grinds, we will only step over on this wheel 50 thousandths at the time. 3 more thousandths. I'm going to come back out and get a little more. Yeah, we'll get a little more coolant going now. You hear that little skip when it goes over the drill hole? That's what I was talking about. You can see in the videos where this unnamed person is grinding over that gouge he has cut in his workpiece. Now that's about, I'm going to say 99%. There's one little spot right here on this end. So I'm going to only go 2 thousandths down this time and see if we can get to the bottom of that spot. Alright, that cleaned up. I'm going to go 1 thousandths down and only step over. This is not, I'm only going to step over 50 thousandths at the time now, but this is not our final finish grind on this. We'll get to that as the very last thing. Alright, I'm going to turn the wheel off, turn the feed off, and turn the coolant off. This, of course, is what it looked like coming off the mill. And this is our semi-finish. We're going to come back again after we give the wheel another dress. And we'll do another pass on this, only taking about 4/10 of a thousandths off. But now we're going to flip it over, being sure there's no burrs on the edge. Now, I shouldn't have to adjust my Y any. I'm not going to adjust it down any to begin this first pass. I want to make one pass over it, see if it touches anywhere, and then start my feed process from there. Alright, just like that, the second side is done. Now I want to do these edges. And I could set my vise up here. I've got a vise to go on the mag chuck. I could set it up there to hold it in place. But that's just one more, actually 2 more surfaces, the bottom of the vise and the top of the vise, that comes between the work material and the mag vise, meaning it's a possibility if that vise is not 100% parallel and flat, you'd be introducing more air there. So what I like to do is use these magnetic transfer blocks. What these blocks do is transfer the magnetism, the waves of magnetism from the mag chuck through this block to your workpiece. So I like to put them in place, and then on the end that I'm working towards, put a stop. And that, my friends, I don't think is going anywhere. So we'll bring the wheel up. And again, just like before, I'm not going to touch off with this turning at speed. And I just touched off and backed off just a little bit. And I'll just make an easy pass. You see one end of this is just a little higher than the other end. If you know or can see a burr or a ridge sticking up on at some location, that would be the place to touch off. That was so little I couldn't see that with the eye. But I'm going to lock in place 1, 2, 3 thousandths. On everything except a little bit down at this one end down here. So I'll get the 3 thousandths again. And that looks good, so I'll take the 1 thousandths. Now I'm going to try to let my blocks stay sitting in place. Ease that out. Clean off the workpiece. Repeat the same process. I will not move down on the Y any. I'll cut, find my happy median, and then feed from there. Now this piece, I'm not sure if you can see it in the camera or not, but there's a little bit of an edge right here that's not going to clear up. I saw that in the mill, but I made an executive decision not to try to mill more of that off, enough of that off the thickness to try to clean that up. This particular rail, piece of rail might have had something to do with that curve in it, but it had a little bit more of a bevel right here on this one edge. We'll make that the bottom of the bench anvil. Alright, that cleaned up in one pass, so that would tell me that my mill vise is probably set up as close to being perpendicular to the end mill. In other words, that's closer than the actual left or right tram on. So I'll take the 1 thousandths now and just step over the small steps. Now we need to do the ends. And yes, I'm going to set them up with the transfer blocks and not use the vise. Alright, we're going to take this one a little bit easier. Maybe only take 1 thousandths at the time instead of 3 at the time. We just want to clean this end up. Okay, we've got all 6 surfaces ground now. Take a quick look with the square, keeping in mind this is a bench anvil, but I'm not sure I could have done it any better had I been trying to be more precision. Okay, now I'm going to get set up to chamfer the edges. Alright, I got my Tom Lipton chamfering block up here. Close, but clearance is clearance. For right now, I'm going to open it up just to get the wheel set. As I've mentioned before on this surface grinder, this has had a post in the middle and stops on each end here, just bump stops. But I took this post out, drilled and tapped it for 1/4 20, and put just a just a piece of threaded rod in there with a ball on it, and that makes an excellent lock for the X travel. I'm going to turn it up now. I'm going to set just a sacrificial block on there. Let me rinse that off a little bit. Now I'm just going to gradually move in on the Z until I touch. Now I know from previous experience that about 20 thousandths in on the Z gives a 20-25 thousandths will give a good chamfer. So that's in. Also, just outside of the range of the camera here, there was a threaded hole on the side there, so I put a 5/16 rod in that with a handle on it, and that gives me a lock for the Y-axis. So nothing should accidentally move. Very nice, even chamfer all the way in. And all this doing rinsing on here, I don't want to stick my hand up there and wipe it off, but I'm hoping this is going to rinse some grit off, because it will damage your finish. Even though we're going to put another finish on this, I don't want to put any more scrapes in it than I have to. Now this is the edge that's got that little bit of roll in it, so I don't expect it to chamfer much there. Folks have suggested that I use wax, candle wax on that to make it slide a little easier. I tried that, but for me, it pretty much just made it sticky. Alright, we got one more edge, one more long edge. And I can tell you from past experience, I'm getting very few scratches, or a lot less scratches now than I did when I wasn't using this rinse in between. Alright, let's try one of the ends. I just got a pretty ugly scratch right across there. Now this is not deep at all. 0.2 of a thousandths maybe is all it'll take to take that out. But I think I've just determined this is coming off of this edge right here on my chamfer block, because on the other side I got the same thing. So off camera, before I use this again, I'm going to roll that edge right there just a little bit. Now to get these short edges, that just requires a little extra holding, and sometimes it works better just to come into it. Alright, before I wrap this video up, I'm going to set this back up here and take just maybe a 0.5 thousandths off of each side just to get rid of those drag marks. Then I'll meet you over on the bench and we'll do a quick recap. Okay, I think it's time we wrap up this video on making a bench anvil out of a piece of railroad track. I'm going to try to get an up-close picture of the way these chamfers turn out using that chamfering block. I am really pleased with that, and hopefully you can see it in the picture, but it comes out to a nice pointed little pyramid, three-sided pyramid on each corner. I didn't actually weigh this piece before I started, but I weighed this one, which is going to be very close, was very close in size to what I started with. It weighed 3.849 pounds. The finished piece weighs 2.577 pounds, which is a 33% loss in weight, just to clean that up. But there's still some good steel in here, and the finished product being 1.27 pounds, or I'm sorry, 2.57 pounds, almost 2.58, 1.2 kilograms. That's plenty heavy enough for a bench anvil. So I hope you've got a little enjoyment out of this. Hope you enjoyed seeing my grandfather's old bench anvil. And maybe you learned just a little bit about using your surface grinder. So take care, and I'll see you on the next video.